Very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICANN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. So before we begin today's class, I want to clarify on two things that I had told yesterday. The article that I was referring to while talking about the power of the governor to reserve the bills for consideration of the president, it's Article 200, and by mistake I had told it as 220, so please correct that. And secondly, while I was talking about the police reforms and I was quoting an example. The place I was talking about was it is in Kerala and not in Tamil Nadu. So these are the two corrections that I want you to do. With this, we'll start. So we'll be talking about Hima Das today. As you all know, she is an Indian sprinter, and she is the first Indian woman to win gold in any form of global track event at the World Under 20 Championships. So we'll see what she has said, that in my first nationals, my father brought running shoes and I wrote Adidas on them with my hand. Adidas is now making shoes with my name. So with this story, you can see how hardworking she has been, her perseverance, her endurance, and also she even did not have proper running shoes, but then she didn't use that as an excuse. So only those people who really want to do something will find a way, and the others will only find excuse. So this shows her dedication towards her goal and her positive attitude, because she could have complained that she doesn't have the right kind of shoes to participate in the athletic events. But that should have showed her disability, her mental disability, because it is said that the greatest disability is the wrong attitude. So this shows her positive attitude also. And she comes from a very poor background where her parents were farmers. So this shows that no amount of hurdles will come the way of a person who is ready to work hard, persevere, endure, and achieve that goal. And no matter what hurdles come, she didn't see them as hurdles but rather as opportunities, and she has achieved a lot. She's also, because as of now she's just 20 years old, she's also a youth icon, we can say. So with this, we'll start with the first topic of the day, is the privacy concerns during COVID. So many of you had asked in the comment box to include the relevant newspaper article while discussing a topic. So that's why I'm including the article here, which talks about the privacy concerns during a pandemic. So we'll see what it includes. The privacy concerns are now coming up because of the technology that is being invoked at 3 levels. So at the first and the basic level is that the state governments are collecting data about the list of people who have been who are suspected of being infected by COVID. So a database of all the people who are infected is being prepared by the state governments under the Epidemics Act 1897. So this is there. The second level is that the governments have also been deploying geofencing and even the drone imagery for surveillance. So this is the second level. And third is, we have seen that contact tracing apps like Arogya Setu are being employed to track and help in the surveillance. So at these levels, at these 3 levels, technology is being invoked, and this is what has given rise to various privacy concerns. Now let's see how. The first is that, as I told, the state governments are making a database of the people who are suspected to be infected. So this they are doing under the Epidemics Act 1897. But the legislation doesn't allow them to publicize this data. But however, state governments are publicizing this data. So this has led to loss of privacy for these people. And also it is leading to a second order harm also. Because once the list is publicized, everybody knows who the infected persons are, and these infected persons will be stigmatized. So people with symptoms are actually refusing to even go to the hospitals because of the stigma attached. So there is a loss of privacy in this. The second thing was, as I was telling, that governments have been using geofencing and drone imagery for surveillance. So in this case also, we have not come across any order in the public that is authorizing surveillance through the drones. And also it is said that these surveillance drones are using thermal imaging, nighttime reconnaissance and all that. And according to the Aircraft Act of 1934, there has to be a compulsory registration or licensing of the drones, but this again is not visible at this point of time. So this has again compromised the privacy of people. The third thing is about the contact tracing apps like the Arogya Setu. But here again, we do not know the details of the technical architecture of that is involved, and also we are not aware, we do not have the source code of the Arogya Setu app in the public domain. And again, the app is used to collect so much of data about the individuals, and it has no legislative backing. So all of these again will lead to a lot of personal private data being put out there in these apps, but again the privacy is being compromised. So at this juncture, it is important to talk about the reasonable restrictions. Even the Supreme Court, when it gave the judgment of the Puttaswamy judgment, where it told that fundamental privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21, it said that though privacy is a fundamental right, this right is not going to be absolute. So there can be legitimately curtailed restrictions which should be reasonable in nature. So the Supreme Court was of the opinion that any restriction that is imposed on the privacy will have to balance out three things. So one is legality. We have to think about the legality, and then what is the necessity, and the third is the doctrine of proportionality. So these three things will have to be thought about before imposing any restriction on privacy. So this now we'll go to the second issue, which is a labor issue. The article is titled Vividly Imagining the Life of Migrant Workers. So in this article, there was a very vivid description of the pain that these migrant laborers are facing. So it is said that they don't get the minimum regular wage per month. That is first of all very less, and that also they don't get timely. They get it after several months, and when they finally get it also, they don't get what they have to get. Some arbitrary deductions are made from their payments before the payments are made to them, and because they don't have regular wages, they will have to borrow money from their employers or from the local money lenders, so which makes them more financially vulnerable also. And they work for long hours, between 10 to 13 hours a day. And if you look at their shelters, as is shown in the figure, this is a shelter of many people. They live in tents also, makeshift apartments or anything. They don't have any access to potable water, toilets and electricity. So it means that they have very bad working and living conditions. So why I picked up this description about their status and their lives is that this is very important in the case of whenever you are writing your essay paper. See, you might have accumulated a lot of knowledge while preparing for the general studies paper. But essay paper is not just pouring out all the GS knowledge into the essay paper along with quoting all the legislations and all the facts and all that. Essay paper is about describing something in such simple words that it makes the reader connect to it emotionally. So now as I read this description about the status and the living conditions of these laborers, I am connected to it emotionally and I can almost feel the pain. So this is how you should write an essay paper, that the reader is able to connect to your essay emotionally. So that is when you will fetch more marks. So with this we will see what is the need for labor reforms in India. So first of all, the directive principles of state policy itself under article 16 talks about equal opportunity in the government job, that is a fundamental right. And then Article 41 talks about social security in employment. Then Article 42 talks about humane conditions of work that the state has to provide to the people, and also about maternity benefit and all. So all of these articles under DPSP, the state has to provide good working conditions for the laborers. So this explains why we need labor reform. The second thing is that as of now there has been a legal jungle. So there are over 44 central laws and also over 100 state laws. So because of which it has created a legal jungle. So there is a lot of confusion about the laws and what it does and what it provides for the workers, what are the rights of the workers. Over all of these there is a lot of confusion. So we have to help reduce this confusion and also balance out the interests of both the employers and the employees. So this is a second reason why we need labor reforms. Third is about the ease of doing business. So when we have so many laws, the firms will have to comply with all of these laws. So it will increase the compliance costs for the states. So this has been one of these important concerns when it comes to the ease of doing business in India. So definitely, as you can see in the graph, according to the latest one, the 2020, India is ranked 63 in the ease of doing business index. But we still have a long way to go. So in order to improve this, it is important that these so many laws are minimized and the labor laws reforms is there, so that the firms don't find it extremely difficult to hire and fire as they want to be able to do business. So for this also we need to improve the labor reforms. So in this you can see that even in 2019, when India was ranked 77, starting a business and registering a property and paying of taxes and enforcing contracts, in all these India still has a very bad rank. So to improve all these things, we need to bring about labor reforms. Next is the growth of firms. So Economic Survey 2018 spoke about dwarfism in firms in India. So which means that there are some dwarf firms which they are those firms which are aged more than 10 years, but they still employ less than 100 employees. Why? Because in the case of small firms, the amount of compliance that the firms need to do is less. So they can hire and fire as and when they want. But as the number of employees increases beyond 100, there will be many restrictions on the firms. So that is why this acts as an incentive for the firms to remain small itself. So that is why they remain dwarf. So also, as you can see in the figure, Rajasthan had implemented the labor reforms. So after it implemented the labor reforms, it was seen that the number of factories that had more than 100 employees was only 3.65% before the reform, and after that it increased to 9.33%. So similarly, the total output in the Rajasthan was 3.13, which increased to 12, and for the rest of India it just remained less. So what has Rajasthan government done? It has amended the Industrial Disputes Act, and it has said that earlier it was the condition was that whenever a firm is retrenching more than 100 employees, it requires the prior approval of the government, and which was very hard to get. So the firms were not able to retrench their employees. But Rajasthan amended this and made that 100 to 300. So only when the firms are retrenching more than 300 employees, the firms need to take a prior approval of the government. So with this, the firms got an incentive to expand their size more than 100. So that is why the number of firms with more than 100 employees had increased. But for the rest of India, it was only this much. So survey had told that labor reforms in Rajasthan had increased the growth rate of firms. So if you want to increase the growth rate of firms, if you want to have that economies of scale, and we need to go for labor reforms. And there are also several other issues because of which we need to go for reforms. The one being a segmented labor market. So we have a very segmented labor market where there is a sharp dichotomy. On the one hand is the organized sector, which is regularized, which is regulated with the help of laws, and there is also high wages. But on the other hand is the unorganized sector, which is not regulated, and the wages are also very low. The second is we have a very poor social security to the workers in the unorganized sector. The third issue is about the trade union issues. The Trade Unions Act 1926 provides that more than 7 or more persons of a particular firm can come together and they can form a union. So this has led to union militancy in the 1960s and 1970s. There had also been multiplicities of union, so this has led to inter-union rivalry also. So which is all again bad for a firm. So that is why also we need reforms. And next is the issue of the contract laborers. Economic Survey had pointed out that these contract laborers are based on the hire and fire approach. So these contract laborers will not have any permanent loyalties towards any particular firm, and also because they are not engaged in a particular firm for a long period of time, they are also not developing a firm specific skill set. So neither are they getting skilled, nor are they developing any permanent loyalties towards a particular firm. So this was what the Economic Survey had told. Because of all these issues, we need labor reforms. So this has explained the need for the reforms. So recently, India has formulated four codes, the labor code that will comprise of four codes. One code will be on the wages, the other code will be on the industrial relations, third code will be on social security, and fourth code will be on occupational safety, health and working conditions. So these are the four labor codes that will be there, and that will subsume all those 44 central laws and more than 100 state laws. So it is going to minimize that legal jungle. This formulation of the four codes was also recommended by the Second National Commission on Labour under Ravindra Verma. So this commission had also recommended that such four codes need to be created. So first we'll talk about the wage code. So this talks about a minimum wage. So minimum wage will help to ensure that there is a minimum standard of living and a dignified wage. And secondly, it talks about a national minimum floor wage. So which means that the state governments can provide a minimum wage which is more than this, but it won't be less than this. So this will ensure, this will reduce the wage disparities that are there between the states. The third is, it says that digital mode or checks must be used for making the wage payment. So this will ensure that there is more financial inclusion and there is more digitization, and all these will bring it will also increase the formalization of this informal sector. Then it also talks about the punishment, that wherever less than the minimum wage is given, then there will be a fine up to 50,000, and there will also be a web-based, transparent and accountable inspection will be there. So it talks about all of these things. So next we will see the code on industrial relations. So here it says that they want, instead of employing on contract, there will be fixed term employment that will be allowed under the law. So once the fixed term gets over, then the contract can be terminated, so not before that. So all these fixed term workers will have all the statutory benefits also. Then even when they are employed for the fixed term, there will be a reskilling fund will be set up, where these retrenched employees, that is after the fixed term expires, they will all be trained with the help of this reskilling fund. And also it says that if there is if a firm has to retrench more than 100 workers, then prior government approval for the retrenchment is needed, but then this can be changed through a notification. So this is balancing the interest of both the workers and the firm. Then it also says that there will be a 2-member tribunal will be there. So this will look into all the important cases so that they are adjudicated timely and in a speedy manner. So these are all there. And when I spoke about the wage code, it is going to subsume all the wage related legislations. For example, the Payment of Bonus Act, the Payment of Wages Act, the Minimum Wages Act, Equal Remuneration Act. So all of these are going to be subsumed under the wage code. Similarly, under the Industrial Relations Code, we have legislations like the Trade Unions Act, Industrial Disputes Act, Industrial Employments Act. All of these will be subsumed under the Code on Industrial Relations. The third is a Code on Occupational Safety. So it means, so in this there will be one registration for one establishment, and also there will be annual and free health checkup for all the employees will be there. Appointment letters will be given to all the employees, so that they will have the statutory benefits. They will enjoy the statutory benefits. There will also be facilities for inspection and inquiry to ensure that all these things are being done or not. There will also be a National Occupation Safety and a Health Advisory Board will be there. So all of these things are there. Next is a Code on Social Security, which says that any firm that has 10 or more employees will have to provide health and pension and other benefits also. And also, wherever if a particular firm is involved in carrying out some hazardous activities, then government will also notify other benefits. Then it also gives flexibility to the employees regarding how much they want to contribute to the provident fund. that is also there. And then there will be a social security fund that is going to be set up, through which all the social security of the employees is going to be taken care. And even the corporate social responsibility funds, the CSR funds, can be pooled into this, and even that could be used for providing social security. So all of these measures have been taken under the code on social security. But there have been several issues that in the code also. For example, the code on wages talks about a minimum wage. So as you can see in the graph, the as per the 15th Labor Conference in the Supreme Court, the minimum wage is 18,000 per month. But the national floor level minimum wage that the code specifies is just rupees 4,628. So you can say that the floor minimum wage is very, very less, so compared to what has been recommended. And also the wage code says that there has to be equal remuneration for both the female and the male employees, but it doesn't deal with the recruitment per se. When we talk of equal remuneration to both, it comes only after employment. But what about entry to the employment itself? So the code doesn't talk about that. And if you look at the global female rate of female labor force participation, it is just 27% for India. So with this, this is not being addressed by the wage code. And there have been other issues also, which says that the new code will caters to both the organized and the unorganized sectors in the same method. But we know that in the unorganized sectors, it's a different scenario at all, completely. And also the government representation is more in the various dispute resolution mechanisms, and workers' representation is very less under the new code. The industrial relations code has also, it is being criticized that it has restricted the right to form the union, because before it said that 7 or more % of the workers, if they are together, then they can form a union. But now this is changed to 10% of the workers or 100. So the right to form union has been more restricted. So these are some of the criticisms with respect to these 4 codes. And whenever we talk about the way forward, we should also list a few way forward also. That for example, this labor code doesn't address the living conditions and the working conditions and the social security and the minimum wages of the domestic workers. So there has to be a national policy for domestic workers also for ensuring their welfare. And similarly, the code doesn't talk about apprenticeship, so this has to be promoted. And when we say that there is a fixed term contract and all that, but we saw in the ease of doing business index that contract enforcement, we are ranked very bad. So we need to focus on that as well. And overall, we need to improve and provide a more conducive environment for skill development. So based on this, you can write it as a way forward and conclude. Now we'll move to the next topic, which is the issue of immunization. So here the UNICEF is telling that already 4.5 million of the South Asian children have missed out their routine immunization. And now that a pandemic has struck the world, this is going to rise further. And also the vaccine stocks are now running low because there is lockdown and travel bans. So that's why the vaccine stocks are also now going to go low. So UNICEF has thus urged and recommended the governments that the immunization campaigns which have now been suspended, the governments must plan to restart them once the lockdown is removed. So related to this is when we talk about health, the data is that the union budget of 2020-21, the budget allocated for the health is 67,500 crore nearly, which is about just 2.1% of the total budgetary outlay. So this is about immunization and what UNICEF is telling immunization. Next is on religious freedom. So the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom has put India under the countries of particular concern category in its 2020 report. It says that this has been done so because of the concerns over the Citizenship Amendment Act, the proposed National Register for Citizens, then the situation that is prevailing in Jammu and Kashmir. Because of all these things, India has been put like that. And this is the first time that India has been put under this category of countries of particular concern since 2004. This actually means that India is being placed alongside countries like North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, China. So with these countries, India is being placed. So this was also in news today. Next is a little data on the digital divide. So in this, Niti Aayog in its strategy for New India 75 report has highlighted that nearly 55,000 villages in the country are going without a mobile network coverage. So even earlier in the earlier videos, we had analyzed digital divide in a very detailed manner. So in that you can add this data that 55,000 villages in the country are without mobile network coverage, and wherever possible, whenever you are talking about some specific data, wherever possible, also mention the source of the data. Here Niti Aayog's report. So this is the data on digital data. Next is we'll come to some important concepts. These are those concepts which can be used in your answers to enrich the answers and score those extra half mark, 1 mark per question, so that it gives you a margin of more than 10 marks per paper, which means 40 to 50 marks overall. So this is what becomes important at the end of the day. So first we will talk about economies of scope. So all of us know about economies of scale. So which means that when economies of scale means where the production is so large, the costs per unit will reduce. So what it is being said is that instead of economies of scale, we must have economies of scope at the local level. So which means that the local producers, now what they are doing is they are producing a particular thing on such a large scale, and they are supplying those products in the global markets. But rather, what we should have is these local economies must have a variety of capabilities. They must produce a lot of things so that there is more resilient. Because with this economies of scale, what is happening is the local area, the local producers are producing the same thing, one thing on a large scale for the global market. So when the global markets are shut down because of the corona crisis, so they are all being vulnerable. But rather, if they have variety of capabilities, there will be more resilience among them. So the local economic webs must be strengthened, and we must have economies of scope rather than economies of scale. So wherever any question comes on centralization, decentralization, what should be the balance, how to go about it, so you can talk about economies of scope rather than economies of scale in the conclusion, or as one of the suggestions if it is being asked in the question. So that will help you to make your answer stand out of the rest. The other concept is about the tragedy of commons. This tragedy of commons was a concept that was given by Garrett Hardin. So what it says is commons means those resources which belongs to everybody in the community. So the tragedy that is associated with them is that whenever something belongs to everybody, it is not cared by anybody. So this tragedy of commons principle was used to argue for privatization. So whenever something is a public property, nobody cares for it. But if it becomes a private property, the private person or the individual will have an interest in that, a vested interest in that, and the person will take care of that property. So this argument was given during the privatization drives that then there has to be privatization. But Ostrom, who was a Nobel Prize winner of economics in 2008, gave a different explanation to the tragedy of commons. What she argued is that whenever these commons, that is these common resources, if they are with the community, if they are with the local people who use these resources, then they will be managed the best. Because it is these people who are using these resources, who are benefiting these resources, that is why they know that they will continue to get benefits from the resource only when they take care of the resource. So these resources will be managed best by those who benefit from such resources. So therefore, she argues that the tragedy actually happens when external groups try to extend their power to gain a personal advantage. Therefore, she advocated for a bottoms-up approach to issues and managing of the property on a community and local basis. So today we are facing ecological challenges and inequalities. So if we adopt a local approach where people are themselves coming up with local solutions based on the local conditions and the local resource set, then that will be more beneficial. So again, you can talk about the tragedy of commons and Ostrom's view about it, even in your essays and answers, that whenever you have to write something that we need to go for more decentralization and all that. So next is I like to give a tip for essay. in essay, today there was an article that was written by former Chief Election Commissioner of India, Qureshi. So he has written a small story about a small anecdote of his life. He says that his 7-year-old son returned from a posh Delhi school and asks, Papa, are we Musalmans? And the father was bewildered and he asked back, why do you ask? So the boy was telling that other children, his child says that the other children in my class were telling me that I was a Musalman. And S.Y. Qureshi says that this happened nearly 30 years ago. So the time now is even worse. And even Nazia Irum. So you have to quote such books and such authors, all of these, and personal anecdotes of these well-known people like S.Y. Qureshi. So that is going to make your essay more enriched. So here Nazia Irum in her book Mothering a Muslim has documented this phenomenon, and she says that the Muslim children as young as 3 have been called as terrorists by their classmates. So there has been communalization of textbooks and demonizing some communities, and all of these things are happening. So whenever you talk about communalism and all that, so you can quote these anecdotes that will enrich your answers. Next, we will discuss yesterday's question. I had asked for the need for police reforms in India. So first of all, you will see in the introduction, you may have to write, you will write what is the need for the police per se. So we need to have the law and order maintained. The crimes are increasing, so we need to have, we need to restrict that. And similarly, we need peace, security and tranquility in the country and in our surroundings. And also you can talk about the broken window syndrome. So broken window syndrome was explained by the second ARC in its report on law and order. It says that first of all there will be law and order, and then is public order, and then is internal security. So which means whenever there is any law and order disturbance, it should better be curtailed then and there. It should better be dealt then and there. If it doesn't, then it might degenerate to form a public order problem. If public order at the public order level also it is not handled, then it will become an internal security problem. So therefore it is always better to ensure that whatever law and order disturbance is there, it is dealt then and there. So because of this we need police. So this you can explain for the need for police. Now we come to the need for the police reforms. Firstly, the nature of crime itself is changing. So from the traditional nature of crimes like murder and theft, we have come to the modern times where we have cyber theft, biological deaths. So all these, the nature of crime itself has undergone a lot of change. Second is people are becoming more aware. So they are more aware of their rights, of their entitlements. So people, the police needs to be more prompt and efficient. So they cannot be harassing the people, but rather they must respect the rights of the people and treat them with dignified manner. So for this we need to have reform the police. See, one type of reform is a structural reform, and the other type of reform is a behavioral reform. So when we talk about the behavioral reform, to reform the attitudinal exposure of the police is again very important, because the people are themselves becoming more aware and vocal about their rights. The third thing is tools for handling the law and order is also changing. So we can see that earlier we had guns and water cannons, but now we have social media and tweets. So Delhi police, Mumbai police, even Bangalore, they're using social media platforms to manage law and order more efficiently, to create more awareness among the people, and to reach out to the people. So these tools are also undergoing a lot of change. Then also we see that there is a lot of corruption also in the department. That is also there. And then there is also growth in the technology. There is forensic science, the information technology and computer science. All of that is there. So you can address all of these things. And also there is a lot of politicization of the police. So this needs to be reduced. Then also we need to create a perception among the people that the police is for them. So we need to have that bridge between the police and the people. And it is traditionally said that police are criminals in uniform. So this has been the perception about the police among the public. So this perception has to change. So we need to have this perception also. That needs to change. And also when we talk about some data, the crimes, terror and these threats have actually is costing India nearly 9% of GDP. So the crimes, terrors, and threats are causing India 9% of the GDP, while it is costing China 4% of GDP, and it is costing Japan 3% of GDP. So it is important to ensure that even for the economic development as a whole, these crimes, terrorism, all of these comes to an end. So this all explains the need for the reforms. Again, when you talk about the structure, then you can again say the representation of women in the police is less. Then there is a lot of hierarchy in the police. More than 10 to 12 steps hierarchy is there. So second ARC says that 6 to 7 is the best to have. So there is a lot of hierarchy which needs to be reduced. Then there is a lot of entry at the constable level, and they are not being trained, so that is very important. Their working conditions, they work for long hours a day, so which makes them mentally emotionally very vulnerable also, so that is very important. So these structural reforms you can say, and then behavioral reforms. So in these categories you can explain your answer, and while you're concluding you can use the recommendations made by several commissions, and also the Prakash Singh Supreme Court's judgment in the Prakash Singh case, that can be used, and the National Police Commission recommendations, the Thomas Committee recommendations, then Solis Swarabji committees. So all of these Malimat Committee recommendations, with these recommendations you can conclude your answer. Then also you can quote examples like community policing, which is the best way forward to go about, so that can be there. And you can also quote some international example like UK or Germany. So there how the police are quite different there. For example, in Germany, a person who enters as a constable will also become a police chief one day. So this ensures that this actually is a big morale booster for the police, that they have such very good promotional prospects. So this is very important. So like that you can quote some examples, and you can also quote the SMART police. So SMART is S stands for strict and sensitive, and M for modern and mobile, A for alert and accountable, R for reliable and responsive, and T is for tech savvy and trained. So we need to go for this SMART police, so that will be the way forward. So today's question is, you have to analyze the reasons for low labor force participation rate of women in India. It is a 10-marker question for 150 words. So now I have started to give some 10-marker questions because often I find that in the question paper, when we start writing the 10-mark question, students usually spend 2 hours in answering the first 10-marker questions. So then they will be left with only 1 hour to answer the remaining 15-marker questions. So this will lead to gross time mismanagement, and they will then compromise on the length and quality of the answer. So it's very important that we don't spend unnecessarily more time on the 10 markers, and we finish that as fast as possible. So if to do that, we need to have all the points in mind before only, so that we don't spend time there to think about the 10 marker questions. So please do answer or at least make a mental frame. So that's it for today. Thank you.